Hello guys, you're welcome all. And the subject of this review today is literature review. Before you begin for any research, you need to conduct a literature review. So in this session, we are going to talk about how to do a literature review that is very precise. The first thing you need to do as a researcher is to define your topic. Defining a topic, it means what are the main criteria or what are the main factors that you want to find out or you want to examine. For example, you say you're talking about tax compliance on SMEs in Kenya. So, what factors affect the tax compliance on SMEs in Kenya? You first identify those factors that you think can affect the variables. Or you can just see, you can also talk about what factors affect performance of employees, maybe in the national government. So there are several definition of your topics. Before you do your research, you have to define your topics. In that sense, you talk about what are the factors affecting the tax compliance. After you define your topic, you search for relevant literature. By searching for relevant literature, it helps you in converging your ideas. You can use the tools that academic tools like Google Scholar. And if you're using Google Scholar, there is a way to search. For example, if we are talking about tax compliance and SMEs in Kenya, you do that combination. You write tax compliance, you write the SMEs, and you write Kenya. So that combination can give you the studies that have been done on uh, on that scenario as a previous study. So it will give you all the studies that have been done on tax compliance and SMEs in Kenya. After you search for relevant literature, you prioritize the sources and select the most recent publication. It means once you search your document in Google Scholar, there are several uh, downloads will come out. So you select, you prioritize your sources, and then you go for the most recent publication. After that, you read and organize. This means for each source, you take notes on the study objective, theory used, methodologies, the key findings, limitations, and recommendations. So when you are reading, you don't just read the whole document. You focus on the objectives, the theories, the methodologies, and the what are their findings? What do they find about their conclusions? Then the limitations. Limitation will help you to focus on areas they have not done. That limitation on the research will help you to focus on the areas that they have not dwell on it. Then the recommendations. So when you are reading your literature review, you take note of this. You don't just read the whole document, you just uh, prioritize and select uh, the main component. Then uh, after that, you analyze and synthesize. This means like you look for these patterns. Where do studies agree or disagree? For the literature you have done, whether do these studies agree or disagree? Because there are some findings will say this one affects significantly, and they will agree. Or there are other studies that say they don't affect significantly. It means they disagree. So you look for where do these studies agree or disagree. And then are the populations settings method underused? Which method have been used mostly? Maybe you can talk about the qualitative or quantitative method that they have used, or they have not, they have underused or they have overused. So that you can also look at the certain variables or relationship ignored. Maybe if you're talking about factors affecting tax compliance, and you find that mostly they are talking about the electronic filing system, they talk about taxpayer education, maybe they don't talk, they haven't talked about the social psychological factors. So what are the factors that have been ignored that can help you to explore on that area? And then you look about the new changes like technology, policies that have not been studied. After that, you look about the gaps. And how do you look about the research gap? First, you look at the criteria and then analyze. For example, the methodological gap, you can talk about where you can say most research they used qualitative methods, no one has done quantitative analysis. So when you're talking about your gap, you you look at the method that they have used. Maybe this one they have used more of qualitative and want to use quantitative. That's a methodological gap. Then we have the theoretical gap. Maybe studies apply economic models, but they ignore psychological theories. So which theory have mostly been used and which theories have been underused? So you talk about those theories that are missing. Then the other criteria to find a research gap is to look at inconsistent findings. Maybe one study says e-filing improve compliance, but another study says e-filing does not improve compliance. This means there is inconsistent finding. They disagree. One says improve, another one says doesn't improve. So it means there is inconsistent finding, and this can be one of your gaps to say that there have been disagreement on whether e-filing affects compliance. Therefore, this study is eager to find out how does this variable affect in these circumstances because of that inconsistency findings. After that, then you will structure your literature review. You start with the introduction, purpose, like we say about this chapter introduces the theoretical, talks about the empirical review, the gaps, the conclusion, your purpose and the scope. After you have done the introduction, then you talk about the theoretical background, which are the main theories you have used. Maybe you are talking about the theory of learned behavior. So you talk about the main theories. In your study, there should be a main theory and supporting theory. You first start with the main theory and then you explain your supporting theories. Then, after the theoretical background, you talk about the empirical review. Maybe you talk about the factors. How that these studies affected previous studies? Then you explain. You look at this one, I've done this. What about maybe you can say Simon 2020 have said e-filing affect tax compliance. However, he has missed out on this following. You state, you look at the study and then you state your gap. This is when the gap is where you clearly point what is missing. Then you do your conclusions. So that was all about the session for today. Uh, a literature review is very, very, very important because it is starting point for the research. Before you do your studies, you just look the literature because this is the backbone of the research. It's where you identify the problem. That was the brief illustrations, and we'll meet more in the previous or in the coming sessions. Thank you.